Who were the Ottonians? And what did they have to do with establishing the Holy Roman Empire? When did Poland and Hungary emerge? Who was Sven Forkbeard? And how did William the Bastard become William the Conqueror? These and other questions will be answered right after this. I am Professor Jerome Arkenberg and the host of History Waits for No One. In this episode, we'll see the effect of Viking and Magyar attacks on East and West Frankland, how the Viking attacks on England were stopped by Alfred the Great, and how England was unified under his successors, how Otto the Great stopped the Magyars and established the Holy Roman Empire, how England was conquered by the King of Norway and Denmark, Sven Forkbeard, and then again by his son, Canute the Great, how William the Bastard, Duke of Normandy, invaded England and conquered it, becoming William the Conqueror, how the Byzantine Emperor Romanos IV was decisively defeated at the Battle of Manzikert by Alp Arslan of the Seljuk Turks, thus losing the heart of his empire and sparking the Crusades. And finally, how the First Crusade, against all odds, amazingly conquered the Holy Land and Jerusalem. But first, make sure to click like, share, and subscribe, and that little bell thingy, so I can continue to bring you more great episodes. West Frankland bore the brunt of Viking and Arab attacks, causing its collapse into states ruled by warlords, independent in all but name, its kings having only as much power as the lands they themselves controlled. In Iberia, the collapse of Carolingian rule under Viking assault led to the emergence of 5 Christian kingdoms: Aragon, Castile, Navarre, Leon, Galicia, and Portugal, who fought each other and the Muslims. In Britain, the Vikings first arrived as raiders in the year 786, and in the 9th century began coming as conquerors and settlers, first taking over Northumbria in 876, then Mercia in 877, Dublin across the Irish Sea in 878, stopped only by the youngest of a series of sons who had been king and died in battle, Alfred, King of Wessex, who forced the Viking leader Guthrum in the year 886 to divide England along Watling Street, the old Roman road running from London to Chester, and accept baptism as a Christian. Under Edward the Elder, who reigned from 899 to 924, Athelstan from 924 to 940, and King Edgar 957 to 975, England was reconquered from the Vikings, Dublin subdued. Edgar even sailed all the way around Britain, Scotland, and down to the Irish Sea annually on inspection tours. Meanwhile, East Frankland bore the brunt of Magyar attacks, as you see coming through here, with some Viking attacks from the north, also attacks by the Slavic peoples, Wends, Sorbs, and others, and central power devolved into the hands of local warlords. In 911, the last of the Carolingians in the east, Louis the Child, died, you guessed it, childless. And Conrad of Franconia, who reigned a mere 6 years, 911 to 918, took over. 7 years. But lacking great landed wealth, Conrad proved weak, unable to check the barbarian attacks. Of course, that was one of the main reasons that he was elected. He was weak, allowing the dukes of all the other regions of Germany to pretty much do as they pleased. On Conrad's death, Henry the Fowler, who loved fouling, Duke of Saxony, succeeded, reigning from 919 to 936. The Fowler was located up here in Saxony. He turned towns, villas, and abbeys into forts against the Magyars, defeating them for the first time at the Battle of Riada in 933. The Fowler also established Schleswig, this part right here, as a frontier march against the Danes, eventually forcing the king of the Danes to accept Christian missionaries without killing them immediately. The Fowler's son, Otto the Great, 936 to 973, from his base here in Saxony, added Franconia, Bavaria, and Lorraine, this huge area, to his personal domain, thus quadrupling his power, reduced Burgundy to submission, conquered the Czechs, and made the Poles pay tribute. Then, in 955, Otto decisively defeated the Magyars at the Battle of the Lechfeld, ending the Magyar threat. With their defeat, the Magyars, under their king, Geza, accepted baptism as Catholics, tying Hungary to Western Europe instead of to the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines have been sending missionaries out trying to convert and bring them into the fold of Byzantium. And then, shortly after the reign of his successor in the year 1000, Pope Sylvester II recognized Isvan, or Stephen, as king, Saint Stephen, who then turned Hungary into one of the bulwarks of the West against both the Byzantines and the later Turks. Poland formed around the same time. This time, the kingdom centered north in Gniezno, and the Poles, under the leader Mieszko, a much later drawn example, of course, accepted baptism as Catholics in 966. Under Mieszko's son, Bolesław the Brave, they conquered territories in the east, including Kiev, and territories in the west, such as Bohemia and Moravia. Bolesław being recognized as the first king of Poland by the Pope in the year 1025. Meanwhile, back in Germany, in 962, after his defeat of the Magyars, Otto the Great journeyed south across the Brenner Pass into Italy, and there forced the Pope to crown him Roman Emperor of the German nation. So you may recall, Charlemagne did not want the title. The Pope sort of sprung it on him. This time around, the Pope did not want to give Otto the title, but was forced to do so. And this is Otto's crown. And thus, what will later come to be called the Holy Roman Empire, a name given to it by Voltaire, because by the 18th century it was neither Roman nor holy, but it was the Roman Empire of the German nation, but it was born at last. However, Otto's successors, his son, grandson, and great-grandson, Otto II, Otto III, and Henry II, got bogged down trying to conquer southern Italy and Sicily from the Byzantines and later from Arab attacks, and frittered away the chance to turn Germany into a centralized state, much as the English kings were doing. Henry the Black, who reigned from 1039 to 1056, restarted the effort to centralize rule in Germany, and Henry IV was on the path to rule all Europe, to unify all Europe under his rule, until he ran into the ambitions of Pope Gregory VII in the Papal Revolution. Meanwhile, Sven Forkbeard, for which there's no actual picture, King of Norway and Denmark, not really Vikings, clearly Scandinavians. The Viking Age itself had largely come to an end, but as regular states, the King of Denmark and Norway decided to invade England and take it over in the year 990. And by 1013, he had conquered it from its king, Ethelred Unready, or as sometimes called, Ethelred the Unready, who reigned from 978 to 1013. However, Sven did not live long to enjoy the fruits of his labors, for he died the next year in 1014. Ethelred came back to rule until he died 2 years later in 1016, and that same year, his son, Edmund Ironsides, who reigned a few months only, was defeated by Sven's son, Canute the Great, who added England to his northern empire. So you see here depictions on coins of Ethelred, Canute, and two of Canute's sons, Harold Harefoot, who was clearly a hobbit, and Harthacnut. Canute was so powerful, he was able to take a pilgrimage to Rome and back without fear of any rebellion back home. And again, after the reign of his sons, Harold Harefoot and Harthacnut, Edward the Confessor, who reigned from 1042 to 1066, reigned and died without an heir. Why? Because he preferred the life of a celibate monk. He was married, but refused to have any concourse with her, and thus died without an heir. Probably why he goes on to become St. Edward the Confessor. Harold Hardrada, the king of Norway, invaded, but was defeated at the Battle of Stamford Bridge by the new king, Harold II, Harold Godwinson. Less than a month later, William the Bastard, or as I like to call him, Bill the Bastard, an illegitimate son who had succeeded his father as Duke of Normandy, invaded England and defeated Harold II at the Battle of Hastings in the year 1066. This was a difficult fight, and Harold's forces were actually winning, except on the verge of victory, Harold was struck in the eye by an arrow and dropped dead. And Bill the Conqueror, Bill the Bastard thus becomes Bill the Conqueror, comes to rule, changing the focus of England from Scandinavia and the north to France and the rest of Europe on the continent. Momentous event. Only 5 years after Harold's historic defeat at the Battle of Hastings, an even more momentous defeat took place in Armenia. In the year 1071, when at the Battle of Manzikert, here it is right here, Arslan, ruler of the Seljuk Turks, defeated the Byzantine Emperor Romanos IV at the Battle of Manzikert. This was a shattering and decisive defeat, which caused the Byzantines the loss of Anatolia, today's Asian Turkey. Anatolia being at the time the source of most of the empire's population, soldiers, and taxes, because its lands in the Balkans, Thracia, what's now Bulgaria, and Greece were heavily depopulated. After a generation of chaos in Byzantium, a new emperor, Alexius Komnenos, asked the Pope for aid against the Turks, which came in the form of a movement known as the Crusades, which transformed the Middle East and forever changed Europe's relationship with the Muslim world. In conjunction with the Crusaders, the Byzantines were able to regain many of the coastlands of Anatolia, around Trebizond, Sinope, and the rest here. However, Turks moved into the interior, where they set up their own Sultanate of Rum. Actually, it's their way of saying Rome, but Sultan of Rum sounds better, forcing its Christian inhabitants to flee before them. The First Crusade was the most successful of them all, managed to come across, fight their way in conjunction with the Byzantines, and sometimes against the Byzantines, across Anatolia, taking Edessa, Antioch after a long siege, moving south, taking one city after another, until, amazingly, were able in 1099 to take Jerusalem itself, slaughtering its largely Christian population, and then set up a string of Crusader states in Syria and Palestine. Yes, ever since the Arab conquest, the majority of people in the Middle East and in North Africa had been Christian. The Muslims had been a distinct minority. Even in the Persian realms, the Muslims were a distinct minority compared to the Zoroastrians of Persia. It was only slowly, largely by the 10th and 11th century, that Persia becomes nearly entirely converted to Islam, and not really until the Crusades that the majority of the population in the Middle East and North Africa become Muslims, largely seen as sort of fifth columnist by their fellow Arabs. These were Arab Christians. They were largely forced into converting. But that's the story. That's for another story. Godfrey of Bouillon, one of the leaders of the Crusade, was elected the first king, and he set up the kingdom's governance as a model feudal state. And to this day, historians of feudalism, if you want to know what feudalism looked like in terms of a country, in terms of a state, you look to the kingdom of Jerusalem, because that was it. That's all the Crusaders knew, and that's how they set it up. So, let me know what you liked about this episode of History Waits for No One. Be sure to click like, share, subscribe, and that little bell thingy. It will help me bring you more great episodes. If you want to know more, there are recommended studies on this topic in the description below, along with other ways to connect with me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the past.